Hey everyone, Aaron here from MTGChallengers, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering deck tech. Today I'll be going over Naya Hexproof for Journey into Nyx Standard. This is probably my favorite deck in the format right now. I love playing hexproof based decks. The traditional problem with auras has been that you can get X for 1 really easily because you can load up a creature with auras, but if they remove it, then all the auras go along with it. So playing a lot of hexproof creatures, since they can't be targeted, fixes that problem. So the idea of the deck is just to play a bunch of hexproof creatures and then play a ton of auras to pump them up and just abuse the mechanic. Ever since Theros, it's been a decent deck, but with a few Journey into Nyx cards to complement the core build, it really has made this deck a serious competitive player in the format. So let's get right into the cards here. Starting with the creatures, I have 4 Gladecover Scout, 1 mana 1/1 hexproof guy. That's just exactly where this deck wants to be for a 1-drop. He gets in under counter spells, and you can start loading him up with auras immediately. That's about all there is to say about this guy. Then I have a playset of Bassara Tower Archer, one of the new Journey into Nyx editions, and it really helps make the deck much better. Before, we only had Gladecover Scout and Witchstalker as hexproof creatures, which was fine, but 8 hexproof creatures wasn't quite the consistency the deck needed to take on other decks. So with 4 of the Tower Archer, you can count on getting out a hexproof guy every game, and it being a 2-drop also helps make the curve lower and more consistent. Beyond that, it's a hexproof creature, beginning stats don't matter, but it does also have Reach, which can be really good up against Stormbreath Dragon in particular, since it can easily block it if enchanted, and none of the main deck removal hits it. Then I have 3 copies of Witchstalker, so 11 hexproof creatures overall. Just need it for the consistency. I was running 4, but I decided to push it down to 3 for a few reasons. 12 hexproof creatures can get a little bit redundant, and it's a tad slow since we aren't running any mana dorks. Still, it's a pretty beefy creature on its own, and that will only be increased later in the game. He also disrupts control and mono black with his ability, which is always welcome. The final creature I have is Ghor-Clan Rampager as a 3-of. This is definitely a place where the splash of red makes things really awesome. It makes it to where you don't necessarily have to draw any auras to attack into their creatures, which again helps with consistency, and when you do play the auras, it just pushes through a lot more damage. The vast majority of the time, he'll just be a pump spell, but if we're having trouble, we can easily have him enter as a 4/4 trampler to help us get back into the game, which makes him flexible. Moving on, I have my beatdown auras, which are the centerpiece of this deck. 4 Ethereal Armor is absolutely mandatory, and probably the best card in the entire deck. With a total of 19 enchantments in the main board, just 1 can make something huge, and if you get out multiples, it just gets downright unfair. It does what it's supposed to do, it makes creatures bigger, it's incredibly cheap for what it does, and it also makes them essentially unkillable in combat due to the first strike. Then I have a playset of Madcap Skills, another amazing aura to have in here. +3/+0 is really significant, and you can play it turn 2 on a scout and attack for 4, which is really amazing. It's just awesome for getting around mid-range or control decks that probably aren't going to have a ton of creatures out at once, and if you are playing up against the aggressive decks, they're going to have to sacrifice quite a few of their guys to get rid of him. 4 Unflinching Courage is really the win condition of the deck. It being out just makes it extremely difficult for your opponent to win. You're punching through their creatures and dealing damage to them and gaining a ton of life on top of it. Against things like Burn and other aggressive decks especially, they just lose if you play it, which makes it an amazing spell in this format. Rounding out the creature auras, I have 2 Gift of Orzhova. A lot of these decks aren't running this card, but it's actually really important. As I said before, Courage is basically the win condition for the deck, so if you don't get it out, it makes winning not impossible, but more difficult than it should be, so I wanted a couple of these to basically act like 2 more copies of Unflinching Courage. A 3-mana aura that gives a buff, evasion, and lifelink. It's definitely not as good as Courage, of course. It only gives +1/+1. It's always going to be double white for this deck, which can be awkward, and I like Trample more than Flying for this deck, but as a 2-of, it's really awesome, and I think more people are going to realize how important this card is. Onto the remaining spells, I have 5 Charms, 3 Boros, and 2 Selesnya. Boros Charm is just amazing. Board wipes are one of the main ways people get around hexproof, so having the indestructibility mode to counter things like Supreme Verdict is awesome. The 4 damage mode is just great when you've dealt a ton of damage and just need to close the game out, which happens fairly often. And then there's the double strike ability. The interesting thing about this is, while it's generally the least used mode in other decks, it's probably the most used one here, since we're dealing in just huge creatures with really beneficial abilities like lifelink, flying, and trample. And giving a huge guy like that double strike can literally be game over, since they'll hit for twice their damage and you'll get all the benefits associated with it. The 2 Selesnya Charms are also an important part of the deck. I originally wasn't running this card at all, but I realized just how good it is right now. +2/+2 and Trample is just fine as a combat trick, but the main advantages lie in the other two abilities. Sacrificing outlets like Devour Flesh and Desecration Demon are also ways decks get around Hexproof, and Selesnya Charm is basically your all-in-one answer to them. If they play the demon, you can just exile it, and if they cast Devour Flesh to make you sacrifice your one fatty, you can flash in a 2/2 in response and sacrifice it, so it'll save your buffed up creature. Then I have some removal to round things out. 2 Chain to the Rocks is really awesome in this deck. I am running 8 mountains, which should generally be enough. It'll be able to exile any of the gods, like Thassa or Iroas if their devotion gets out of hand, as well as anything else other than things that have protection from white. And the final spell I have is Banishing Light. 3 of it is really awesome to have since it's less circumstantial than Chain to the Rocks. It will get rid of just about anything like Detention Spheres, Thassas, almost every creature in the format, and Planeswalkers as well, like Domri Raid, and particularly Elspeth since her -3 ability can be a problem. The removal package as a whole for this deck is really awesome since they're all exiling effects, so they get around indestructibility, and they're all enchantments as well, so they work well with Ethereal Armor. So that's it for the spells. Let's move on to the mana base. First off, I have perhaps the most important addition from Journey into Nyx, Mana Confluence. A playset of it is really what makes the 3-color mana base work. It comes in untapped and taps for any of the colors that we need, and the 1 life payment is really negligible since there is quite a bit of life gain in the deck. This, along with the Tower Archer and Banishing Light, is really what takes the deck to the next competitive level. Then I have the typical 12 Shocklands, so 4 Temple Garden, 4 Stomping Ground, and 4 Sacred Foundry, and then I have 6 Scrylands consisting of 4 Temple of Plenty, 1 Temple of Abandon, and 1 Temple of Triumph. So a total of 22 lands here, which is just fine. The Scrylands, they do come into play tapped, but they provide more fixing for consistency's sake, and it also helps the splash of red a lot with the 2 1-ofs. So that's it for the main board. Let's move on to the sideboard. First off, I have 3 Skylasher. Really good to side in against mono blue and control decks to make the curve smaller and still have an effectively hexproof creature. It's protected against things like Dissolve, Syncopate, and Detention Sphere, so it's a great sideboard option. Then, in the same vein, I have 1 Fiendslayer Paladin. Great up against Burn and Mono Black Devotion since it has protection from their spells. It also has First Strike and Lifelink intrinsically, so you don't have to rely on auras as much. Magma Spray as a 2-of is really good to have in the side against smaller, problematic creatures like Mutavault and Voice of Resurgence, as well as any other weenie creatures. 3 Mizzium Mortars is one of the most important cards in the sideboard as it will take down bigger creatures like Loxodon Smiter, as well as problematic, hard-to-remove ones like Stormbreath Dragon and Blood Baron of Vizkopa. Next I have 2 Deicide, amazing sideboard tech. Dedicated enchantment removal is awesome and a necessity in this format. Again, gets rid of things like Detention Sphere, and it obviously gets rid of any and all gods permanently in any given game, which is awesome. Then I have 1 more Selesnya Charm and 1 more Boros Charm. I already explained how good these cards are, I just have a couple extras on the side to emphasize their effects in the matchups in which they perform the best. And finally, I have 2 Sphere of Safety. A great card to side in against aggressive and mid-range decks that are running a lot of creatures. We're running 19 enchantments in the main deck, so having one of these out will basically ensure that they almost never get to attack you, and if they do, doing so will result in an inefficient allocation of their resources, which is almost always good for you. So that's it for this deck tech. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out our others. To see these decks in action, check out our gameplays, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the Facebook page, and consider making a donation to support the continuation of this project. Thanks for visiting, and if you like what you see, subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content.